The Green Bay Packers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what do they have in common? Well, they have MVP quarterbacks, Super Bowl winning quarterbacks who are aging and maybe starting to really show their age. Both teams also 3-4, another thing both have in common. And right now, one last thing they have in common. They should be really concerned about where this season is heading. Look, I'm not one to push the panic button when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback. I don't care if they're 45 or 25. Greatness is greatness. And Tom Brady is less than 2 years removed from winning another Super Bowl. So you can understand why there's reason to sit there and say, look, let's wait it out. Let's see how things go. But we're starting to get to a point where you start looking at things and wondering where it's all headed. Let's start with the Packers, who I think right now, because of circumstances, are in more trouble than the Buccaneers. The Packers just lost a third straight game. They've lost to the Giants, to the Jets, and now to the Washington Commanders. On Sunday, they fell in Washington at FedEx Field, 23-21. It wasn't all on Rodgers, but he's going to be the focal point because, well, he's Aaron Rodgers. He was only 23 of 35 for a $194. In case you were wondering, that's 5.5 yards per attempt, a QBR of 48.9. Did have 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, but not good enough. And when you look at why things are going the way they're going, it's not just about Aaron Rodgers. It's about the lack of weapons. It's about the lack of protection. It is about the run game. So let's break down all those things. The run game. Aaron Jones got 8 carries all day in a close game. A.J. Dillon got 4 carries all day. They had 12 carries total for 38 yards on 3.2 yards an attempt and no scores. Not going to get it done. Then you go to the passing game. Here are the names of some of the guys who caught passes today for the Packers. Amari Rodgers, Alan Lazard, Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan, Sammy Watkins. That's not to say that all those guys are bad players. They're certainly not. Lazard is a respectable NFL receiver, and Sammy Watkins has been around the block, and Aaron Jones is very good. He even caught 2 touchdowns today, should be said. Robert Tonyan is a quality tight end. Here's the problem. None of those guys are top-end targets. None of them. Jones is an excellent receiving back, but that's what he is. There is not a number 1 receiver to be heard of on the Packers. You could make a really good argument there's not a number 2 receiver. Rodgers can only do so much, and he's behind the line that today did not give up a sack. Kudos to that group. But David Bakhtiari, they're all pro, star left tackle, out with a knee injury. This is a real problem. He was inactive for the game. Bakhtiari tore an ACL in practice on New Year's Eve 2020. He has never been able to stay on the field consistently since. He missed all but 1 game last year. He played a half of football in Week 18 against the Lions. Could not go in the playoffs. And this year, it's been back and forth, inactive, active, inactive, active. It's not been good enough. The Packers desperately need Bakhtiari to come back. They need to kick Elton Jenkins inside. They need to put Zach Tom at right tackle. But none of that's happening because they keep playing this game of musical chairs, and a lot of that is because Bakhtiari is not there week in and week out. So the Packers fall to 3-4. Well, meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings gained a half game because the Vikings had a bye week. And this upcoming week, they play the Arizona Cardinals in a game they most certainly can win and are favored in to do so. Meanwhile, the Packers, they got to go play the Buffalo Bills, who are coming off a bye week. And oh, by the way, it's on Sunday Night Football in primetime. The Packers are an 11-point dog in this game. And you know what? They ought to be. They have been awful. They cannot score. The Packers have done nothing to show that they're going to suddenly come out of this. On 3rd down against Washington, 0 for 6. 0 for 6. Did nothing in the game. Yards per play, 4.9, a brutal number. They took 9 penalties. They had a turnover on a fumble lost. They only had the ball for 22 minutes and 53 seconds. And if all this sounds bad, it's because it is. The Packers had 232 total yards of offense. 232 yards against the Washington Commanders, a team that had 2 wins prior to Sunday, and they came against the Bears, who stink, and Jacksonville, who stinks. That's where the Packers are right now. And if the Packers lose to Buffalo and Minnesota beats Arizona, both the things, again, more than favored to do in the eyes of the Vegas sportsbooks, well, guess what? the Packers would be 3.5 games out of first place in the division, and they've already lost to Minnesota. The Vikings winning at home at US Bank Stadium in Week 1. So yeah, that's a problem. It's not all on Aaron Rodgers, but certainly he wears it. Just like he gets all the credit for the success, he's getting a lot of blame when they lose, and rightfully so. Now, on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady. The Buccaneers, you could not find a pair of more embarrassing losses than what they've suffered through. They have been double-digit favorites each of the past 2 weeks on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Carolina Panthers. And if you thought losing 2018 to the Steelers was bad, well, they just lost 21-3 to the actively tanking Carolina Panthers. P.J. Walker went 16-22 for a $177 and 2 touchdowns, and the Panthers ran for 173 yards on 6.4 yards per carry, essentially doing whatever they wanted to do. This game felt almost predetermined when on the first offensive drive of the game for the Bucs, Brady threw a perfect deep ball to Mike Evans, whose coverage corner slipped on the play. Evans would have walked in for a touchdown. He dropped it. And that's basically the way the game went. The Buccaneers did not score until down 14-0 with 4th and goal in the fourth quarter. Todd Bowles decided that was a good time to kick a field goal. And so that was the only 3 points the Buccaneers were able to put on the board all day long. Brady, for his part, 32 of 49, 290 yards, 5.9 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, no picks, and a QBR of 55.8. Not his finest day. Granted, it would have looked a lot better if that throw to Evans had been completed, but it was not. Tampa, much like the Packers, cannot run the ball despite desperately trying to. They had 16 carries. They ran for 46 yards, 2.9 yards an attempt. Obviously could not get into the end zone. It's nowhere near good enough for Tampa Bay. Now, here's the other side of this. The Buccaneers have Mike Evans and they have Chris Godwin. So they have real weapons, unlike the Packers. That's not the issue. The offensive line, well, that has been an issue. And the defense the last couple of weeks seemingly starting to crack a little bit. They were so great. That defense was nails the first 3 weeks. Then the Chiefs hung 41 up on Tampa. And since then, it's been a roller coaster. They almost lost to Atlanta, if not for one of the worst roughing the passer calls you'll ever see with Grady Jarrett. They get away with it. They win the game. Maybe they would have lost, but they win. And you say, okay, Tampa gets the break, and all of a sudden off they go. Now they're going to get rolling at 3-2. Nope. Losses to Kenny Pickett, losses to P.J. Walker. Here we are, 3-4. The Buccaneers desperately trying to get back on track. They play on Thursday night at home against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Should be a very interesting game. The Ravens at 4-3, not playing great. A very weird season for them so far. A lot of blown leads. The passing game not really clicking. We will see. But for Tampa, the ray of sunshine that they have that the Packers most certainly do not is the division is awful. The Saints are 2-5. Carolina is 2-5. Atlanta is 3-4, and the Bucs have a win over the Falcons already. The Buccaneers probably go 8-9 and win the division if they had to. But that is not what this season is about for Brady, who is 45 years old, might retire after this year. If he doesn't retire, he's hitting free agency. This was about winning the Super Bowl. This was about getting back in a very weak NFC. And right now, it feels like that's not going to happen. The Buccaneers have been brutal offensively, absolutely brutal. And again, that was exemplified against a bad Carolina team when the Bucs could do nothing. They were only able to muster 322 yards. They were not able to run the ball at all, as previously mentioned. On third down, the Bucs were 2 of 12. They did not take a lot of penalties. They didn't have any turnovers. That wasn't the problem. They just simply couldn't execute. They could not get the job done. 4.9 yards per play, 2 full yards less than what the Panthers put up in that category. So that's where you are right now. If you're Aaron Rodgers and you're Tom Brady, you are 3-4. You are looking like a middle-rung team in a bad NFC. And while the Packers have more work to do than the Bucs considering their circumstances, both quarterbacks better get moving or it could be a really, really ugly, forgettable year for both Green Bay and Tampa Bay as the calendar starts getting ready to turn toward November.